Shalom and welcome. Today we will be addressing the two renditions to the conclusion of Mark chapter 7 verse 19. That is, thus he declared all foods clean and purging all meats. In the book of Mark chapter 7 verse 19, Jesus addresses issues concerning cleanliness and what makes a person unclean. The verse in question has nonetheless become a subject of debate among many biblical scholars and translators due to differing interpretations of its meaning and translation. The two renditions to the conclusion of the verse are, thus he declared all foods clean, and purging all meats. Now, depending on the version of the Bible you use, this passage is often interpreted as Jesus challenging the importance of strict dietary laws and emphasizing the significance of inner purity. Thus he declared all foods clean is commonly found in translations like the New International Version, or the NIV, and the English Standard Version, the ESV. On the other hand, purging all meats is a rendering found in older translations of the Bible, such as the King James Version, or the KJV. The difference in translation reflects variations in interpreting the original Greek text. It's important to note that biblical scholars and translators may have different perspectives on the precise meaning of certain passages, leading to differences in translation choices. And, although small, the impact of this linguistic divergence raises some important questions about the original intent of the passage and the implication it carries on theological, cultural, and dietary practices. Those who advocate for the translation, thus he declared all foods clean, will often argue that it accurately captures the intention behind the Greek phrase katharizo pantata phothromata. They state that Jesus' proclamation was about removing dietary restrictions and declaring all foods permissible. This interpretation is supported by the majority of Christian denominations, acting as a foundation for the theological message of inclusivity and freedom from dietary laws, aligning with the teachings and beliefs of numerous Christians around the world. Although the Greek phrase katharizon pantata phothromata is found in numerous manuscripts of the Gospel of Mark, it does not include thus he declared. This is often rendered in parentheses, signifying it wasn't in the original text of the Bible, but was added as an explanation or as some sort of footnote. This would leave the actual Greek phrase as saying, cleaning all foods, since the thus he declared isn't found in the original. The Greek words in this sentence are katharizo. It is Strong's number G2511, and it translates to cleanse, literally or figuratively, to make clean or cleanse again, purge and purify. The second would be the pantata. It is Strong's number G3956, and it translates to all, any, every, the whole. The third is phothromata. It is Strong's number G1033, and it translates as food, literally or figuratively, that is, which is eaten, food. This means that the Greek sentence that is often translated to all foods clean should actually read as cleansing or cleaning all foods, that is, purging all foods. Is Jesus' statement here a declaration that all foods are clean, or is he referring to something else? Let's look at the context from a few verses prior to see if this debate between Jesus and the Pharisees was even about the dietary laws. Mark 7:1. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain scribes which came from Jerusalem. Mark 7:2. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say unwashen hands, they found fault. As we can see, the initial point of contention between Jesus and the Pharisees was that Jesus' disciples had began eating without washing their hands. Mark 7:3. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. Now pay close attention to this tradition of the elders. We're coming back to this later. Mark 7 and 4. When they came from the market, except they wash, they eat not, and many other things there be, which they have received to hold, as the washing of cups, and pots, and brazen vessels, and of tables. Mark 7 and 5. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, Why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashen hands? Jesus then rebukes the Pharisees for their accusations against him and his disciples. Mark 7 and 15. There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of a man, those are the things that defile the man. Mark 7 and 16. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. Mark 7 and 17. And when he was entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. Mark 7 and 18. And he saith unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? And here it is, verse 19. Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the drought, purging all meats. Jesus was explaining how the natural process of digestion would ensure that dirt and other impurities would be expelled from the body, since digestion purges all foods, meaning that the bad is cast away and the good remains within us. The context was never concerning kosher or dietary laws, but eating with unwashed hands. Let's look at Jesus' rebuke of the Pharisees in this same situation, but in the book of Matthew, to see if this reasoning makes sense across the two Gospels. So here it is, Matthew 15, starting at verse 17. Do not ye yet understand that whatsoever entereth in at the mouth goeth into the belly, and is cast out into the drought? Matthew 15 and 18. But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. Matthew 15 and 19. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. Pay attention to this, Matthew 15 and 20. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashen hands defileth not a man. Matthew chapter 15 and Mark chapter 7 both recount the same event involving Jesus and the Pharisees. They both share common themes and dialogue, but also have some variations in details. In this case, Matthew 15 and 20 directly references exactly what Jesus was referring to, without any room for speculation, which is why this account isn't changed across Bible translations. Since Mark 7:19 isn't as specific, translators have used that to add a bracketed statement which does not reflect the true context of the verse in question. Purging all meats reflects a more literal rendering of the Greek text. By using the word purging, it signifies a purification process and explains the body's ability to remove impurities or unclean elements from food. Not that eating any food was now permissible. Contextually speaking, the translation rendered as purging all meats matches better within the context shown in the rest of the chapter and even across the Gospels. The translation purging all meats also matches the statements given by the apostles in chapters which take place chronologically after Jesus' statement in Mark 7 and 19. In Acts chapter 10, which takes place after the resurrection of Jesus, since Jesus meets with Paul at the time Saul on the road to Damascus in a chapter prior, Peter makes a statement when given a strange vision from God. This is Acts 10 and 9. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. Verse 10. And he became very hungry, and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. And verse 11. and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending upon him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth. In verse 12, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. In verse 13, and there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. And verse 14, but Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Now, why would Peter make the statement that he hadn't eaten anything that was common or unclean if Jesus had supposedly declared all foods clean and permissible before his death and resurrection during his life on earth? Additionally, it is only the more recent translations of the Bible that have the inserted statement that Jesus declared all foods clean. When we look at the oldest versions of the Bible in English, you will find that they accurately translate katharizo pantata fromata as purging all meats. Let's take a look at some of these translations. This is the John Wycliffe Bible from 1382, and it translates Mark 7:19 as, For it hath not entered into his heart, but into the womb, and beneath it goeth out, purging all meats. The Middle English word womb is accurately defined in this context as the stomach, a digestive organ, the stomach, portion of a body between the torso and the chest. Now, despite the archaic English spelling of the words purging all meats, accurately translates again to purging all meats. No mention of declaring all foods clean. Let's look at the Coverdale Bible from 1535. It translates Mark 7:19 as, For it entereth not into his heart, but into the ye belly, and goeth out into the drought, that purgeth all meats. Yet again, no mention of declaring all foods clean. The Bishop's Bible from 1568 translates Mark 7:19 as, Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the drought, purging all meats. Once more, no mention of declaring all foods clean. This is the Geneva Bible from 1599, and it translates Mark 7:19 as, Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the drought, which is the purging of all meats. And the King James Bible from 1611 translates Mark 7:19 as, Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the drought, purging all meats. No mention of declaring all foods clean. Lastly, let's address what the original Greek is saying directly. Some state that the Greek word katharizo would translate better as cleanse, to make something previously unclean, clean, instead of purge. But is this true? Let's look at where else this word is used in Scripture. This is Hebrews 9:14 in the King James, and it states, How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. Here again, you will see that the KJV has translated the word katharizo as purge. But let's look at how the NIV translates the same verse. This is Hebrews 9:14 in the NIV, and it reads, How much more then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our conscience from the acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God. The context is simple to understand for this one. Christ gave his body to cleanse our conscience from acts that lead to death, that is, sinful acts, since we know Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. Now, the word cleansed used in the NIV translation, which in the Greek is the katharizo, isn't advocating that sinning, which are the acts that lead to death, are somehow being cleansed in the process so that we have freedom to do as we please. It is saying that sinning, that is the acts that lead to death, are being purged out and discarded. Much like our bodies possess the ability to cleanse food substance through the natural filtration process of defecation. Thus, the meaning of the words that Jesus speaks is that nothing eaten with unwashed hands entering at the mouth can defile the heart of a man. That which enters the mouth and is not useful for digestion is ejected from the body. This is especially highlighted by the use of the word drought, which means toilet or latrine. It is the Greek word Strong's number G856, meaning sewer, toilet, and latrine. In conclusion, Jesus' statement in Mark 7:19 was never a reference to the abolishment of dietary laws, but a rebuke against the Pharisees who wanted to impose the doctrine and tradition of hand washing before meals, which for them was not merely a hygienic practice, but had become a ritualistic tradition observed by the Jewish elders. Mark 7:3. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. If you would like to learn more about this tradition, please watch my other video, which explains in full whether or not Jesus Christ taught against the dietary laws of the Torah. And if you would like to understand the vision that God gave Peter in Acts 10, please watch my other video on that. Thank you for watching. Shalom.